Hello again, welcome back. So we are now on to a new paragraph rule. So I will say the rule as before and then you can repeat after me. Listen. We start a new paragraph whenever there is a change in where the main action happens. I'll say that again. Start a new paragraph whenever there is a change in where the main action happens. Okay, I'd like you to repeat that sentence. 3, 2, 1. Good. This was a little bit trickier to identify than just new speaker, new line. When we're reading this story now, we need to think carefully about the events as they are happening. We need to look at the action and the order of the events and think about, has something changed? Has the main action changed for me to need to start a new paragraph? So we have another story to read. This time, this is about Johnny, who has gone cycling in an area not particularly well suited to his bike. So when I'm reading the story, I'm going to be looking at the action. What is it that Johnny is doing? And where are the moments when the action changes? This time, I'm going to use a different symbol for paragraph. Rather than using the letter P, I'm going to use this symbol. 2 diagonal lines, and they are also a way to show that you have started a new paragraph. In fact, they can be a really good way to demonstrate that if you have written a whole chunk of text and your teacher says to you, uh-oh, you've missed out the paragraphs, go back and have another look. You can sometimes use those diagonal lines to show you knew that a new paragraph should go there. Okay, let's make a start. I'm going to read the first part. We'll find the first change in the main action together, and then you can read on independently. Outside the forest, Johnny stopped for a minute to read the sign. Experts only, it said. He watched 3 cyclists whiz past him on their flashy mountain bikes. Johnny looked down at his bike. It was hardly high-tech, because he'd only been cycling for a couple of weeks. Johnny shrugged. I'm sure I'll be fine, he said to himself. Inside the forest, Johnny found the track. Okay, I think I can see a change in where the main action happens here. In this first part, we've been outside the forest, and Johnny had been reading the sign and thinking about his bike. Now we're inside the forest, and Johnny has found the track, so the action has changed. It would be worthwhile putting my 2 diagonal lines here, just before the phrase, inside the forest. Can you mark that on your text, please? Now, as I read through, I want to find 4 more places where a paragraph could go. I'm going to look carefully at what happens in the text, and where and when the main action changes. Let's read on. Inside the forest, Johnny found the track. His eyes followed it through the trees. It did look quite tricky. There were lots of bends and some very steep declines. Johnny proceeded. Okay, I'm going to stop here. Now, inside the forest, Johnny is looking at the track. We can see his eyes looking at it, and he's thinking about the bends and the hills that he can see, or the declines. Now, when he proceeded, that means he moves, right? He goes forward. So that's a change in the action. So 2 lines could go here. Okay, over to you. I'd like you to read on in the text from the line, Johnny proceeded. Look out for where the action keeps changing and see if you can add in 3 more paragraphs. Off you go. Okay, now with another colour pen, let's go through and mark. I'll read from the top. Outside the forest, Johnny stopped for a minute to read the sign. Experts only, it said. He watched 3 cyclists whiz past him on their flashy mountain bikes. Johnny looked down at his bike. It was hardly high-tech because he'd only been cycling for a couple of weeks. Johnny shrugged. "Oh, I'm sure I'll be fine," he said to himself. New paragraph. Inside the forest, Johnny found the track. His eyes followed it through the trees. It did look quite tricky. There were lots of bends and some very steep declines. New paragraph. Johnny proceeded. He was very wobbly, but was determined to keep up with the other cyclists. New paragraph. In fact, the word "after" here clearly signals to us that there's been a change in the action, that time has moved forward. After some shaky cycling, Johnny reached the top of a hill and had to take a minute to catch his breath. He nearly got knocked off his bike as other cyclists flew past him down the slope. "Here goes," he said to himself. He took a deep breath and pushed off from the top of the hill. New paragraph. The next thing he knew, can we see there again as signalling to us a change? The next thing he knew, Johnny was flying through the air. Just before he landed, with a loud splash in the nearest pond. Uh-oh. His bicycle landed just next to him, showering him in a cold wave of pond water. New paragraph. On the edge of the pond, a lady stood and giggled. So this is good. We've got a part that tells us where something happened and the introduction of a new character. So that's a definite shift in the action. Where a lady stood and giggled. She had dismounted from her professional bike and was looking at Johnny with a mixture of disgust and pity. "I think you might be on the wrong course, mate," she laughed. Okay. In fact, we got a new speaker here, haven't we? But she's the first speaker in this new paragraph, so we can keep her up there. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We've got them all. So just check and give yourself a mark out of 5. Okay, well done. We've done lots of practice today, thinking about what we can recall from last term, thinking about using commas in the right place, paragraphing accurately. So now it's over to you to put some of this into practice. Now, each Mastery Monday lesson we've been doing a little bit of writing. So some of the stories you've been writing about might have been where there was a problem or something had happened and we needed to say and infer what might come next. So we're going to look at this as being a problem-solved story that has 4 parts to it. The first one is the opening, and that introduces us to a main character and it makes us clear where the main action takes place. So a bit like Johnny, we need to know where he was. He was out at the forest at this cycling place that said experts only. Number 2, we need a problem then. So this explains what problem the character faces. In the case of Johnny, again, the problem he faced was he really wasn't a competent enough cyclist and his bike really wasn't up to the job of these very, very steep declines. In part 3 then, new paragraph, we have a solution. How is the problem solved? Okay, maybe there is something good happens. We know in our story Johnny ended up in a big muddy puddle and covered in pond water. So what could happen to resolve the story? Perhaps somebody comes along and gives him some lessons or gives him a better bike to learn and practice on. Who knows? And in part 4 then we have some resolution and we'll give them a happy ending to our character. We're going to conclude the story showing how the solving of this problem had been a really good and positive thing. So this is the idea, of our 4-part structure, but we've got some pictures to help you through. So the first thing I want you to do in a moment is to tell the story here, okay? And we're going to do this verbally. We're going to talk to one another. That means you need to talk to somebody sat next to you on your row. And if you don't have somebody sat next to you on your row, your teacher might like to pair you with someone or get you to turn and talk to the people behind. So we have part 1, the opening, okay? We have part 2 here, where Alex ran up to his room. We have part 3 and part 4 of our story. So we need to say, well, what happens in this story? What was the problem? How was it resolved? What's the happy ending? And at the end, at the bottom, we've got this nice vocabulary box. So there's lots of words that can help you to tell the story. We've got January, practice, celebrated, screeched, inspired, strings, June, and bow. So I would like you to spend a few minutes, you're going to pause the video here, and then retell the story between you and your partner. What's happening and in what order, and how is there a happy ending? Off you go. Okay, well done. So once you have had enough time to share that story, you might want to share some more with the class. I'll let your teacher decide that, whether you want to hear some of the retellings of this story before we move on. But we have our characters, don't we? We've got Carol, Peter, Alex and Misty, the cat. And this is really a focus on Alex, isn't it, this story? And we need to see what happens to him throughout the events. So we can be quite clever in having a look carefully at the pictures. Often there's quite a lot that we can tell and infer from them. And we're going to retell this story in order, starting with part 1. So I would like you to use the vocabulary at the bottom to turn each of those images into a story. It says here you can tick off the words when they're done. I don't think we've got a sheet in front of us, but you could always make a list of them in your books and then tick them off once you've added them in. You also need to check those mastery sections. Okay, so there's always mastery skills to include in our writing. So for this one, if you've used speech, okay, well, we want you to use speech really to show you can punctuate accurately. So make sure that you have really used the rules of speech. I want you to use some sentences that start with the words although, unless, or if. And again, if you remember from our last lessons, we must use a comma after that part. And check you have paragraphed correctly. New speaker, new line, and a new paragraph when the main action changes. Okay, you've got 30 minutes in total to complete your writing. When you're ready, please make a start. I look forward to reading these when I come back to work. Have a good day, everyone.